And I've had a big flashing light across my screen that says, "You are live," which means, Andy Kind, mate, I'm really pleased to be hanging out with you for a little while on a Facebook and YouTube Live. You, my friend, are a very good friend of mine and a very good friend of the King's Arms, and really pleased about the fact that we get to hang out this evening for a bit. Thanks for joining us.
It's great. It's like living in the future, isn't it? This is what sci-fi 80s films thought the future would be like, and it is what it's like. So
yeah, you're flashing back when you first watched Back to the Future and Back to the Future 2, when it showed you all the new things that were going to happen, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or Tomorrow's World. This is what they predicted.
Yes.
So I'm any time travelers will be freaked out by the fact that I'm dressed really steampunk and Victorian. People just won't know what era they're in.
I know. I'm trying to work out what is the right point of this evening to ask you both about the fox and about the hat and the dress code. I mean, do we do that early, or do we just, because anyone who joins us slightly later is going to be thinking, what on earth is that guy dressed like? But maybe we should do it now, because it kind of it deals with it, it gets it out of the way. And so what I will say very quickly is that obviously, through the course of this evening, a whole bunch of people are going to join us and no doubt chip in and ask you questions, all right? And I've got a few things that I want to talk to you about as well. And so for the people who are joining us already, guys, you're so welcome. It's great to have you here. And if you want to just say hello, do a little type on Facebook. Tell us who you are. Tell us where you're from. Say hello to Andy. And maybe it's the case you're going to have questions for Andy as well that we can ask him at the same time. But come on then, my friend. I want to know about the hat. I want to know about the tie and the waistcoat and the fox. Right, put us out of our misery, as it were, and tell us what's going on.
Well, there's two very large elephants in the room, aren't there? And one of them's a fox.
Alan,
this is Alan, who is a stuffed agnostic fox. And as you know, I'm in lockdown at the moment, like everybody else. And I'm having to preach at least once a fortnight, but I'm probably doing something at least once a week. And very quickly got bored of just talking to a camera and thought, I'm going to have to bring some variation and variety. And in my store cupboard, I had Alan. He was £5 from Dunelm Mill.
Oh, yes. It's a great store.
So cute. Although he speaks in Latin, which is a bit weird. I don't know how that happened, but if you ask him a question and he deigns to answer, it will be in Latin. I just thought I'd have him involved. And if anyone has watched any of my Redeemer King preaches over the last few months, you'll see that increasingly Alan, who started as an extra, has become basically the leading actor in most of my preaches. So he's a very strong cameo, and each week he'll do something different.
Okay.
He'll either do a Thug Life thing, or we had him with the Titanic theme tune. He has a cameo in all of my preaches, and it just gives a bit of variety, because actually, watching someone on a screen just talking, it's not that it's good or bad, but it's very easy to tune out. And so what I'm always trying to do, both on stage and on screen, is to give people different experiences. And what you can do live with stage presence and intonation, you can't do on screen. So essentially everybody needs an Alan. So
everyone needs an Alan. That's where I've been going wrong, mate. I need to get some kind of stuffed. So hold on, do you use him as like a puppet or as like an aid, or are you like speaking to him the whole time when you're preaching?
He's not a puppet. He's a stuffed agnostic fox. I think I've been very clear on this. So he's in the background for a lot of the time, but that just gives that sense of ominous threat, because you don't know when he's going to launch into action with a cutaway or a cutscene, which I've prepared. So no, I tend to reference him and talk to him at different points, but I'm not preaching at him. He's here. He's the eye candy, really.
He's the eye candy, mate. With that hat, you do not need any eye candy. So come on, tell us about the dress code. Is that got a similar story to it? What's going on?
Well, yeah. So the dress code, several reasons. First of all, if I take off my hat, it looks like Right Said Fred have reformed.
That is actually true. Yeah, we should form a band.
Yeah, we should never form a band. Although we did talk about reforming Five, didn't we, a while ago?
Do you know what? It's kind of a hidden secret. And now you've just outed me publicly that Five are actually one of my favourite bands when I was growing up. Of course, you were right there in that era, weren't you?
Yeah,
love a bit of Five.
We are exactly the same age, 25.
Get on up. That's right, yeah.
So, and the other there's another two reasons for wearing the hat. First of all, it's sort of just accidentally become my branding, if you like. People starting to associate me with wearing a bowler hat, and I think it's good to have something that people can latch onto when they hear the name Andy Kind or they see the bowler hat. So it's a branding exercise. And there is a third reason, but I've forgotten it now. Oh no, this is it. So in the Magnificent Seven, the original Magnificent Seven, with Yul Brynner, who was obviously a bald man, and Steve McQueen, who went on to be in The Great Escape. It was Steve McQueen's first major role, and he was trying to scene steal all the way through. And he was doing that by messing around in the background. And eventually, Yul Brynner said to him, because Yul Brynner was wearing his totally black hat cowboy outfit, very famous. And he said to Steve McQueen, if you don't stop messing around in the background, I will take off my hat, and then the only thing that people will be looking at is my head. The point being that although bald heads are not as attractive as heads of hair, they are more striking and they are more dominant. And so what I'm actually trying to do, this is a genuine thing. It's a nice story, but it's a genuine thing. I'm actually trying to detract away from how I look to what I'm saying. So even though it might look like I'm trying to dress up, I'm actually trying to detract away from how I actually look, so that people are more focusing on the words. So that's the idea.
All right, I get it. Yeah, I don't know whether to take it personally or whether to start thinking about what could be my outfit.
Yeah. No, you're looking good. You've got the sort of.
I appreciate
one
that.
Of the extras from the Magnificent Seven.
One of the extras from the Magnificent Seven.
One of the Mexican villagers.
Bless you. Well, mate, listen, I'm really pleased to have you with us for a little while. What I'm asking everyone to do, and I will just say hello to Dave and to Helen, who are joining us in. If you do join in at any point this evening, guys, feel free to write questions that you want me to ask to Andy, or just say hello. Tell us where you're from. Tell us that you're watching. That'd be great. But one of the things that I'm asking everyone who I have conversations with like this, Andy, to do is give us a little glimpse of your journey to know Jesus, okay? Because there's a reality to the fact that there'll be people watching this who are part of a church, people who have never been along to a church. And, for us, knowing God is a big deal. And so it'd be great maybe to share a little bit about what happened with you.
Yeah, that's a great question. And you and I don't sort of not dissimilar. We realized when we first met that there were a lot of similarities between us. So I was raised in a Christian home. My mum and dad are both Christians, but both first generation Christians, right, really. And so they were working it out as they were going along. So I absorbed a lot of stuff, loads of great stuff from mum and dad, but from the wider society, absorbed a lot of other stuff that I just took de facto as true, okay, which I had to since challenge myself on, because the gospel, the Christian message, if you like, is never heard in isolation. It's always heard against the backdrop of the society in which you're raised. So you can hear lots of things, and if you're not careful and if you're not properly sort of taught and guided, you can sometimes allow a sort of syncretism, like lots of different beliefs coming in to form a sort of faulty, all right, Alan, a sort of faulty worldview. So I was always a believer in God and a believer in Jesus, and mum and dad made him, very evident. So I never doubted that at all, but I also wasn't bothered.
Right,
and,
interesting.
I didn't really need to be bothered, because I was from quite a what some people call a middle class family, but a reasonably comfortable family. I had everything that I ever wanted. We had nice holidays. I had loads of toys, and
right,
went to good schools. I was quite popular. So my needs weren't primarily spiritual in my mind growing up. They were just not. So what happened was I just went through the first couple of decades of my life not particularly interested in what Jesus had to say.
Yeah. And
then went to university and went off the rails, and life fell apart, and just realized that the firm foundation that I'd just taken for granted and just assumed was, a basic belief, a properly basic belief, was actually contingent on my parents' faith and the way that they'd brought me up.
Yeah.
And, so I sort of bottomed out a little bit, fell through the scaffold, and then thought, okay, so I actually do have choices to make. Life isn't just going to be easy for me. It is possible for me to ruin this. And I'm giving you the highlights. Not that this will be on Match of the Day later, but giving you the condensed version. Essentially, at the age of 22, I realised that I had turned away from, the faith of my childhood, from my first love, and needed to turn back. And once you turn back, once you repent, because that's what repentance means, just turning around, changing your mind. That's when the journey starts. That's not where the journey ends.
Yeah, very good.
It starts. And in the SAS, in Andy McNabb's book Seven Troop, when he gets into the SAS and they throw him the sand-coloured beret, they say to him, "Congratulations, it's hard to get, it's harder to keep." And this is something that we need to understand about being a disciple of Jesus. It's easy to make a response to Jesus.
Yeah,
it's
okay.
easy.
Yeah.
Like you and I both know, you can go anywhere and you can say, "Who wants to respond to the love of God?" Oh yeah, me, I do. But that isn't discipleship, because who doesn't want to respond to the greatest love in the universe?
Yeah,
but people then following Jesus, that's the hard bit. And so my turning towards Jesus and my journey with Jesus have been very, very distinct, I think.
Yes. So what happened in those kind of moments? So you finished university, you're around about 22. Like what's the kind of catalyst behind you ultimately thinking, a little bit apathetic, a little bit, he's probably there somewhere, and actually kind of turning to kind of walk after him and be a true disciple, as it were?
Yeah, so I think there's two things to say. And even back then, at the age of 22, I didn't have a Christian friend until I was 24. So I wouldn't have been able to tell you what a disciple was. I didn't know what evangelism was. I didn't understand the word apologetics until I was about 28. So, there's, and now I am part of what I do is apologetics. So I'm a late developer in lots of regards. But two things really. I think, I remember when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I told this the first time I ever preached for you guys at King's Arms. I was healed of a nervous twitch. My mum prayed for me, and I felt the Holy Spirit. I felt really dizzy, and the twitch went.
Wow!
So I felt the healing power of God at sort of 6 years old, and that was amazing. So I'd had lots of other experiences. Another occasion when I was probably about 10, my mum was really prophetic and was often hearing stuff from God, and I said to Mum, because I was, a massive narcissist even then, "Mum, I want to hear God's voice." And she prayed that I would. And that night I had a dream, and it wasn't that someone appeared to me, but just in my mind, dropped into my mind this verse. And I can't remember what the verse was, but we could easily find it out. It's the verse where Jesus is being baptized, and God's voice rests on him and says, "This is my son, the beloved, with whom I am well pleased."
Well pleased, that's right.
And so that verse just, chapter and verse just came into my mind. And I was 10. I didn't read the Bible. So I woke up the next morning and said, "Mum, is this verse in the Bible?" She said, "Yes, let's look it up." I was like, wow, that's amazing. So
wow.
I knew Jesus, and I knew that he knew me. But I was one of the one sheep that he had to come and find and carry back on his shoulders. I was the prodigal son. That's why these stories are in the Bible, because we're all prodigal.
You can start to see yourself in them, can't you?
Yeah, that's right. But then a deeper answer to that, because I think you can have an experience, but you need to have the intellectual as well as the emotional. I don't just mean the academic, but you need to have mind, body, soul, and spirit. All of these things are encompassed within Christian life. And for me, I can have an experience if I have 2 cafetières back to back. Having a spiritual experience, people on LSD apparently have spiritual experiences after I've tried LSD. So actually, the experience is not always the gauge to reality.
Yes.
And I think actually, like, when people in our circles say, if you hear God's voice, it will never disagree with what he says in his word.
Okay.
So there's that mutual accountability, isn't there? And you want the experience, you also want for me, the articulation of what Christian faith is. So let me put it this way. So this is why I'm a Christian. This is not how I became a Christian, but this is why I remain a Christian. If you think about several things are wired into the universe. Story is wired into the universe. Everyone's obsessed with story. Everything that we do, films, books, it's all about story. And story is all founded on identity. The question at the core of any story is who am I? It's all about identity. And if you look at all the major worldviews and you ask, who am I in this worldview? Who am I? Let's look at what some of these people say. So if you say to a Buddhist, who am I? On Buddhism, who am I? A Buddhist, if they wanted to be true to the fundamentals of Buddhism, would have to say, well, you're nothing, as in you are literally no thing, because you do not exist. Nothing really exists. It is all just Maya. It's all just an illusion. You say to an Orthodox Hindu, who am I? And they would have to say, if they wanted to be true to, non-dualistic Hinduism, well, you're nobody, because you do not have a separate identity. You are part of the absolute, of the universal whole, but you do not have a personal identity. And the goal of these Eastern religions is not self-fulfillment, but self-extinction. So there is no self, so you're nobody. A Buddhist would say you're nothing. A Hindu would say you're nobody. You ask an Orthodox Muslim, who am I? And they would have to say, if they want to be true to the Quran, they would have to say, well, you're somebody, but you're not somebody very important. So you're nobody very important. And it may very well be that Allah will show mercy if your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds. That might very well be
sure.
the case. But you might as well flip a coin. A Muslim would quite happily say of Allah, some to heaven and I care not, some to hell and I care not. Allah's primary attribute is not love. So actually, there is no certainty or assurance in Islam. So you're nobody very important. If you end up going to heaven, it's not because God loves you. That isn't how it works. You say to an atheist, who am I? And if they wanted to be true to the fundamentals of the atheistic worldview, they would have to say, well, it's not who you are, it's what you are. You are simply a random collection of molecules and chemicals, beautifully presented and miraculously ordered and great at speaking, but nevertheless, you are nothing more, nothing less than the residue of one big cosmic burp. That's just who you are. You're cosmic shrapnel.
Awkward. Yeah.
It's what you are, and what you are is cosmic shrapnel. You say to a Christian, who am I on your worldview? Yeah. And a Christian, if they wanted to be true to the foundations of Christianity, they would have to say, yes, that's who you are. I've been trying to place you. You're that one that Jesus died for.
Huh.
You're that person that even if you were the only person left on earth, Jesus would still have come and gone to the cross and died for you so that death didn't have to beat you. You're that person who God knew before he formed you in your mother's womb, loves you unconditionally, and came to take on the powers of death and destruction so that you can have life in its fullness. That's who you are, because that's who he is.
Yeah,
so if you're looking for a story where the question of who am I is answered in any satisfactory or meaningful way, there's one place to come. There's one story to go to, and it's the story of the cross and the resurrection.
Love it.
The Christianity is bizarrely and surprisingly unique in how it talks about your worth, your inherent worth. You are loved unconditionally by a creator who values you because of who you are, not because of what you do or haven't done, not because of the color of your skin or your status in society. We are all God's children, and we all have the right to become children of God.
Yes. Oh, preach it. It's good, man. Sounds like you got a message in there somewhere.
No, it's just spontaneous.
Oh, mate, it's so good. It's so good. Listen, I was talking to my wife Philippa earlier, right? I know that you know Philippa well, but I'll just for everyone else who's tuning in, my wife Philippa. And she was reminding me of the first occasion that you ever came to the King's Arms, which was a number of years ago now, actually. And the reason it was amusing is because of the fact that we'd kitted out our foyer all ready for you to kind of come in there, and you've got lights down, and the bar's ready, and the chairs are out, and everyone's getting super excited. And Philippa came to me, and she'd noticed that there was this rugged-looking guy who was looking a little bit scruffy, who seemed to be in the auditorium. And she said to me, Steve, there's and obviously that we do a huge amount of work with the homeless and the disadvantaged. She said, I think there's one of the homeless guys who's in the auditorium, and he's talking to himself and he's pacing around. And I was like, Philippa, that's the comedian. That's the guy who's coming to perform. And there you were, like in the auditorium, pacing up and down, talking to yourself, psyching yourself up, getting yourself in the game, ready to go. And mate, it was the start of a beautiful thing, beautiful relationship with the church, beautiful relationship with us and the community in so many different ways. But I was just thinking, mate, what are you kind of take us back to those kind of early visits? Because you've done comedy nights, you've done preaching for us, you've done Christmas stuff and all sorts. But how have you, if you kind of look back and reflect on your kind of time at King's Arms, what are your main memories?
Yeah, well, I have so many, and I just Redeemer King Church in Chesterfield is where I work, and that's my home church, and RK for life and all of that. But before I moved to Redeemer King, I would have said, and probably did say to lots of you guys, it feels like King's Arms is my spiritual home in a sense, because it was always the case that whenever I came to you guys, like something dramatic would happen and
we like
turn
that.
me around. So first time I ever came, it was 2012. And you sent me a picture of that night, and I look absolutely gross.
Yeah,
like it doesn't. I mean, I'm dressing a lot better these days. Let's put it that way. But first time I'd come straight from Spring Harvest, and I'd been speaking to Kathy Madavan at Spring Harvest about how comedy didn't feel like it was enough. I'd hit a glass ceiling. I wanted comedy plus something.
right.
And then I came to this place. It was a Sunday evening, and I thought it was a pub because it just said King's Arms, Bedford. So I think it'll be a pub. There'll be 50 people. It'll be fine. Blah blah blah. And turn up at this, Crayola factory, absolutely rammed with like young cool people, and then do this gig, and the gig itself was amazing. I mean, it was so fun.
It was great.
And then at the end, I was interviewed, and I just talked about the stuff, similar stuff to what I've just been talking about, the stuff that makes the best sense on Christianity. If Christianity is true, things like love, hope, beauty, and purpose make the most sense. And you guys gave me a standing ovation, and I came off stage thinking, this is it.
Yeah,
that's the plus in the comedy plus. And so I was then going through a phase of like doing loads of, and it's still my preferred model of comedy night, is to do the gig and then to be interviewed at the end. And then did a couple of amazing gigs. And then back in 2016, you rang me up and said, Simon and I have been talking, we'd like you to come and preach on a Sunday. And I don't know whether I actually said to you, but I remember thinking, I don't think you know what you're asking. You don't want me to do that.
Yeah.
But you, obviously, because of the people that you are and the way that you are really keen to pull people up by the bootstraps and just listen, a bit like Karl Beach in Chesterfield, really. Like you have that prophetic edge where you're able to call people up into their identity. You kind of see people's trajectory before they do. And so I did come along and did both your morning services and did my 3 best bits of material and put some Jesus stuff around that. And we saw a number of people respond.
Yeah, come on.
Which was, for me, the first time I'd ever seen that in response to me giving a preach. Well, it's the first time I'd preached, but I was like in awe of people who would see people becoming Christians or wanting to respond to Jesus at the end. That was next level stuff. And I came off stage then, and I remember thinking, I am experiencing an adrenaline that I have never experienced in 13 years of comedy. And I remember thinking, this is what it is.
Yeah, come on.
This is the comedy plus, if you like.
Yeah.
The glass ceiling had totally gone. and I remember thinking that comedy had turned out to be my support act, which really is ironically. So, and then I've been back. I preached for you guys a couple of times, and then merged them. We did the comedy and carols where I did a bit of both, and I love King's Arms. I love it because of the people, and there are loads of people there. And there are some people like who've been to everything I've done, everything I've done. But also, I think it gives me the opportunity to experiment a little bit with style and form, knowing that I'm just totally safe and trusted. And that's so when I'm coming up with stuff, when I'm coming up with preaching ideas, I'm always imagining preaching it either at Redeemer King or at King's Arms. So in my mind, those are the two places that I am. And then I'm thinking about you saying, I'm not sure you should have said this.
So I didn't know that we were going to go public with those kind of conversations, mate.
Yeah. You dragged me down a back alley straight after and bludgeoned me with a baseball bat and a spike.
Those people listening right now will just be wanting to ask the questions about what on earth did he say? They'll be the kind of
this because I love you, Andy.
That's right. I don't think we should go there on the feedback, but feedback's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Tell me it's helped you grow at least a little bit.
I can tell you a little bit that it's helped me.
Well done, mate.
Of course it has. I think there's you do need tough love, and it needs to be tough, and it needs to be loving, and that's not easy for anyone to kind of give. But I think that the people like you and Simon are two of the people I do trust to. I know that if people are challenging, and again, it's not the case that every time I come, you're trying to
that's right.
But I think you are definitely someone, and this is to do with the honor culture that you have at King's Arms. That when you, and this is where I think we need to be better as Christians, and so I do see it modeled very well at King's Arms. Like, I can challenge, but I have to do it in the right spirit. And you guys are all about doing something in the right spirit. It's okay to rebuke, admonish. I know these are quite old-fashioned words, but these are biblical words. But you have to do it with the right heart, based on speaking to that person's true identity. So we never tear down a person. We might tear down an idea or a false belief to build up the person and call them up into their true identity, the person that God has created them to be. So we're all about trying to kind of encourage each other up into the bigger, better story that God's got for us. I think that's probably how you would describe what you do when you take
well, I would hope so. I mean, the truth is that we're so for you, mate, and so we can see God's hand on you, and so anything we can do to kind of help encourage you and to in all those kind of ways. And you're absolutely right, though. I think that when you love someone first, then you actually want to help support and encourage and to kind of lift them up, and sometimes that will come in different forms. But it's really good, mate. It's really good. Hey, listen, tell us a little bit, and I'm going to throw Helen's question up in a moment or two, but tell us a little bit about your journey in comedy. Like, when did you know you were funny? And what did it look like for you to start working on the comedy circuit?
I knew I was funny. I have an exact moment. I knew I was funny in the fourth year of high school. There was a kid in our school called Morris Slack, who is an optician now, and makes a lot more money than I do. And he was asked, like, we were a funny group of lads in our class. We were funny. And he asked who the funniest was. He was asked who the funniest was, and he said Andy Kind. And that was the moment I thought, okay, right, someone believes in me. And
it was all down to him.
You kind of carry that mantle, and and then from that point, I remember being 11 and writing in an English exercise book that I wanted to be Rowan Atkinson when I grew up. I wanted to be a comedian like
Mr. Bean, kind of Rowan Atkinson.
No, more like the Blackadder. I wanted to be more like
yeah.
I was incredibly sardonic for an 11-year-old.
Okay.
It's unnecessarily caustic, but so I always wanted to be a comedian, and I remember being told by a careers advisor that wasn't a good idea.
Yes.
Yeah. So I hope it would be amazing if she came to one of my gigs and received Christ.
Oh, that's the moment. Yeah.
Write it down. So that was the moment. Throughout my younger years, that was the thing I wanted to be. I wanted to be a comedian. And then when I became a Christian, felt like God said, well, yeah, that's because you're not an accident. And the heart's desires that I've placed in you are not accidents either. You are not that random group of molecules and chemicals that we were talking about.
Yes.
So yeah, that was it. And then 2005, 23rd of January 2005, first ever gig.
So this is a stand-up gig in a pub or something? What was the deal?
Stand-up gig in the Porter bar in Bath, yeah.
Is it one of those that you'll look back on now and think, what on earth was I doing?
Well, yes, but also the interesting, unique thing about that night was that it went remarkably well compared to how most first gigs go for people.
Right.
So loads of people try comedy once. Most people never try comedy twice. And I wasn't I had loads of energy, but I wasn't very good when I was, early on in the journey. And so there was just that grace over it, even then. And I've threatened to give up several times. I've given up twice, and then come back and decide that I'm not really qualified for anything else. But now as a preacher, I'm not going to give up that, because the glass ceiling that I felt I was hitting my head against, because there are no better comedy gigs than King's Arms for someone like me at my level. You don't get better gigs like that. You do a big New Frontiers church or a big Vineyard church or a big Anglican or Baptist, whatever. You do a big church and you get big numbers and you get big laughs, because if you're halfway decent, you know how to get big laughs from a big crowd. It's actually, the bigger the crowd, the easier the gig is. Yeah. It's not the other way around. But there's no hierarchy of gigs. I've done a gig at HTB and it wasn't a very well organized gig. It was fine, but it wasn't like
we love you, HTB. Yeah.
That's the big church, so they've got the best gigs. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, interesting.
Whereas with preaching, I remember doing a gig in London. I traveled for like 4 hours to get there, and there's 20 people there, and the gig was fine. It was fine. People laughed, and it was fine, and they said thank you, and they said that was good, which is the worst thing anyone can say to me, by the way. If someone said to me, thanks for that was good. Well, a ham sandwich is good. James Ward-Prowse is good. Like the midfielder.
Southampton midfield player.
Yeah. Steve Chettle was good.
Steve Chettle was very good. Local boy.
But he wasn't Des Walker, was he? He wasn't Des Walker.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah.
You'll never beat Des Walker. And for those people who are who are tuning in who have got no idea what we're talking about right now, both Andy and I are big football fans. And although Andy's an Arsenal fan, he does have a kind of soft spot for Nottingham Forest, who happen to be my team. And so talking about people like Des Walker and Steve Chettle is like us reminiscing from probably when we were around about the age of, I don't know, 8, 9, 10 years of age, and we were hugely into football. So that's where it comes from, all right?
Yeah.
Listen, just coming back to the comedy side of things, and I'm gonna throw Helen's question up for a minute, okay? So she was asking, why did you choose the comedy platform, and is it really difficult to get the balance right? Now, I'm gonna try and put my edge on this particular question, okay? So in terms of choosing comedy, obviously, what I'd love for you to share is that, what are the kind of overlaps between, or the distinct similarities between communicating as a preacher and communicating as a comedian? And then in terms of, is it difficult to get the balance right, I'd love for you to share a little bit about both the humor side of things, but also one of the things that I've so appreciated about you is that you haven't been one of those comics who's had to use so many expletives, who's had to use coarse or crude language, and yet can still be genuinely funny. Does that make sense? So maybe you could share a little bit about those two things.
Yeah. So, and I can actually answer the question by following on from what I was saying before we mentioned Steve Chettle and Des Walker. So I did this gig down in London to 20 people, and it was fine. And I remember thinking that was a complete waste of time. I got paid money, but so what? It didn't count for anything.
Okay.
And then I did a preach in Elgin, which is is so far north of Scotland. It's basically not Scotland anymore. And there were 20 people there, and there was one non-Christian lady, and she got saved. And I remember thinking, the eternal consequences of that preach compared to the consequences or non-consequences of doing that gig in London. Yeah. So I preach. The reason when I talk about the glass ceiling being removed, I simply mean that the purpose and the import that a preach has compared to a comedy gig. Making people laugh is great, but I'm bored of just doing that. Again, it's that comedy plus. And I'm in my late 30s now, and people don't become Christians by accident or in a bubble. Like, we are supposed to be God's hands and feet. And if we want to see the people around us become Christians, we have to tell them about Jesus. The idea of preach the gospel, if necessary, use words, is a total misnomer.
Yeah, well, it sounds great, but I'm afraid it's not biblical.
It sounds great. It's not biblical. It's also totally apocryphal. Like Francis of Assisi probably didn't say that anyway, and yet it's the thing that comes out. It's an excuse for not doing anything.
No, I mean the only thing that I would, in defence of Francis of Assisi, if he did say it, the only thing I would say is that I do believe that people should know you're a Christian by your works and by the way you live your life. And so it's almost like it's not at the exclusion of you using your words, but actually it should be in addition to and almost as a foundation for you to be able to use your words. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh mate,
well,
this
is one of those back alley moments that we were talking about.
Not at all. That is good.
Yeah.
So go on and tell me about that kind of balance of kind of comedy and preaching, and then particularly how you can get away with being a comedian without using that kind of poorer, kind of guttury language.
Yeah, well,
hold on. Actually, I just realised that sounded very judgmental. I apologise. I'm not trying to suggest all comedians who might drop the F-bomb from time to time, but you understand what I'm saying, right? There's a heart behind it.
I understand what you mean, and you're not referencing anybody in particular, so I don't think anyone's going to be particularly offended. Comedy, unless you're playing a total character, your on-stage persona is just an extension of who you are, and I am not somebody, unless I'm watching Arsenal lose, I'm not somebody who's tempted to use guttural language. That isn't me. And so it's not, I'm not trying to not swear. I'm just naturally not swearing.
Yeah, this is who I am.
I'm trying to be funny.
Yeah.
So when people say, "Oh, it's nice to hear that you were clean," but was I funny? Like, I'm not trying to be clean. I actually am. It's nice to see that you were breathing. Oh yeah, but that happens naturally.
Yeah, for sure.
What about the art of it? So yeah, it's not a problem for me to be who I am on stage, and I'm a bit more. And this is it leading into the other part of it. This is the difficult bit, because on stage as a comic, I am quite alpha male, and you've seen I will banter and I will make. I have to dominate. When you're a comedian, you have to dominate. You have to be in charge. And part of the collateral of moving from comedy into preaching was that I brought this, quite broad skill set, which was quite pronounced and sharpened, which made me look like I'd been doing it for years. But also I brought the alpha male. I brought, the sort of the silverback mentality, which meant that I was just a little bit coming across as a little bit arrogant or a little bit aggressive.
Yeah, okay.
And, that's just something that you just unlearn, really. And certainly I think I would hope that I've definitely softened a lot as a preacher. And
I tell you, just on that, you obviously you're part of Redeemer King, and part of your team who actually leads the team there is obviously our good friend Karl Beach. Now, Karl, we love. He's been to King's Arms a number of times. He's such a good guy, and he too would be something of an alpha male. I'm just imagining you trying to banter with him there on the front row, and what that would look like. Probably wouldn't go down so well. Am I right?
Well, but he's a really great friend and brother. Yeah. So actually, we don't clash. I mean, he's the boss first of all, so he's the one who pays my wages. But the only time we ever clash is when he says, "Can you keep it to 30 minutes?" And then 50 minutes later, I'm just coming to my second point. Like, so, I am going to kill you.
Yes, yes, I can understand that.
Yeah, but so it's just it hinges on the reality that comedy is self-elevating and preaching is self-denying. When you're preaching, you actually have to get out of the way and let the Holy Spirit speak. And that is a learned thing. And that's something that, maybe we never mastered. Well, maybe Pilavacci has mastered it, but, maybe Simon Holly's mastered it, but I certainly haven't mastered it. But the thing to do is always be learning, always be aware that, there's areas of weakness. You can always do better, but you're not condemned by your faults and your failings, because when you're up on stage preaching, you're not the only one there. The Holy Spirit's there as well. And, you are you're the Alan to his Andy Kind. Do you know what I mean? So I'm Alan. I'm not really the one doing very much up there. You want to facilitate what God wants to do.
Yeah, very good.
And so it's the skill set I have is definitely tailor-made for preaching, and I have skills and gifts and learned ability that that I'm really glad that I have for preaching. But also, unless I can't build the house on my own, because I'm not the builder. I'm so aware, increasingly aware, that unless God's Spirit is with me and on me, it's pointless. I get paid a lot more doing comedy than I do preaching. Like if I'm just trying to preach about me or posture, go back and do comedy.
Yeah. But it's obviously it's a burnt offering, isn't it? You bring what you feel like God's put on your heart, and ultimately it's down to the Holy Spirit as to whether He's going to breathe on it. And
unless the Lord builds the house, the builder builds in vain. Basically,
that's right. Yeah, very good. Well, listen, if there are people who are going to watch this, whether they're watching live right now or they're going to watch it again afterwards, who are thinking, "Hey, look, I want to take from you a couple of communication tips, as it were." Maybe they communicate in the workplace. Maybe they are kind of budding teachers and preachers. What as a couple of things would you give them as a tips and steers of what you've learned?
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about sort of one-to-one stuff rather than how to be a stage preacher. But one-to-one, and particularly in terms of sharing faith, the most important thing is to listen. The most important thing is to listen and to be interested.
Yeah.
And this isn't something I've invented. We've all had to learn this. You really want to, you're not there to win an argument. Sometimes you will have an argument, but, with gentleness and respect, you engage with that. Some people do want to argue, but you're trying to get to the person. You're trying to win a soul, not an argument. And so learning what that person believes and being secure in who you are in Christ and not being racked by the idol of doubt. You have to know who you are in Jesus. But once you know who you are in Jesus, then you won't be thrown by what people throw at you. And I think trusting that asking someone questions about what they believe and why, and maybe why they rejected Christianity, you're not going to suddenly come up against some sudden monster that defeats your faith.
Yeah, very good.
Any question about Christianity out there that hasn't been, tackled by amazing Christian scholars, and we have the resources in our pocket these days. Yeah. If you've got a question about, how do you defend the gospel in a certain way? Well, research it. Like it's there. Good. It's in your pocket.
Yeah.
So
there's no sin of not thinking things through, right?
No, that's right.
I think it's a good godly thing to research, to study, to explore, and to find out, as you say, what other great Christian minds have done.
And it's about stopping for the one, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about stopping the one, going after the one. That person in front of you, how are they doing? And I know that you say when you're chatting to someone, maybe the first time, you'll say, "Hey, if God could do a miracle in your life, what would that be?" Yeah. I will sometimes say, "Is there an area of your life where you feel like your joy's been stolen?"
Huh.
And both of those are just so disarming questions. Because it's not the standard age-old, slightly caricatured view of evangelicalism, which is, "Hey, let me tell you where you're wrong." It's like,
for sure. Yeah.
Implicit in what you're asking is, I believe in a God of miracles who wants to bless you.
Yes.
And implicit in my question is, it matters to me that your joy is full, that your joy is complete.
Yes. And where is the source of joy? Let me tell you about it.
So listening, genuinely being interested,
very good,
loving the person, but then also understanding that we are there to demolish arguments. So you never tear down the person, but if somebody's living in a false belief which is causing them harm and pain and leading to death or destruction, I mean, and I don't just mean I don't mean hellfire or anything like that. I simply mean if somebody is addicted, if somebody's drinking too much or smoking too much or gaming too much, you don't have to say, oh, well, I love you, so that's fine. We speak to their true identity, and we're calling them, this is the thing, we're calling them to the better story. So we're not trying to say, you need to stop doing that.
Yeah.
See ya. It's like, if you stop doing this, there is something greater that you can engage with. There is a better story than the one you're living out. There is a better out there. You are worth more than this. Not in a passive aggressive, well, I thought you were better than that. There's no moral hierarchy within humanity. There's Jesus and then there's everybody else.
Yes.
But there is a better story. And we shouldn't be afraid to correct or challenge beliefs that are less good than the good news that we've got. Because as I talked about at the start, if you ask different religions, who am I? We call it the gospel because it's good news. It's only good news if the other news is bad. If every other religion or worldview has got good news, then we've just got news or some news or advice. But nobody else is offering you good news. And this is where we have to study. We have to understand that nobody else is offering you good news. There's one story where you're loved unconditionally. There's one story where you are valued innately and inherently because of who you are. There is one story where you can know God personally. There is one story where you can have the assurance of salvation and the assurance of forgiveness. It's the story of Christianity.
Right.
That's the best story out there. It's the only show in town. We shouldn't be afraid to tell people that.
Yes. No, it's good, man. Well, listen, of all the things that you could take away from this evening, the simplicity actually of listening well, stopping for the one, asking good questions is so important. I tell you, one of the people who's watching right now, Claire Coggan, who's one of my favorite people, who is so good at stopping for the one and kind of listening well and engaging with people like that. Because didn't you come down at one point to come and hang out with kind of Claire and the Costa team, hey?
Yeah, and Tim and those guys. We had an amazing day, and brought a couple of my Chesy girls down, and we had this amazing experience. Well, a couple of really amazing experiences actually, where this one guy, and we brought down Donna. Donna was at the time quite a new Christian, and we prayed for this one guy on the street, and he didn't know anything about Jesus. He didn't really know who Jesus was. He'd heard the name, but didn't know who Jesus was. And so we realized that I had a very short space of time to do something. So I just said, look, can we just pray that you would feel God's Spirit? So we put our hands on his shoulders, and just the Holy Spirit came. And he was like, what are you doing? What's going on? What am I experiencing? He said, I've never experienced anything like this before.
Wow,
which is in the Gospels, isn't it? When
beautiful.
Jesus starts doing these miracles. We've never seen anything like this. And we said to him, well, look, this is God's Spirit showing you that what we've just said about Jesus is true. And it was amazing for that guy, but it was amazing for Donna as well, who had just never seen like healing on the streets or anything like that. So
stunning.
But that all came out of, again, the culture that Claire is building there, and Tim and all the guys there. I just, everything that I do is probably in some way based on the origin story of King's Arms.
I'm sure that's not the case, but listen, I'm just glad that God's moving around me, and we have the privilege of connecting with a bunch of people in the same way as you do, and we want to help as best as we possibly can. But listen, take us back to your season right now. And one of the things I was going to mention at the start, forgive me for not, is that obviously there's lots of issues going on right now, right across the news, particularly with regard to what kind of spiraled out of the kind of incident with George Floyd, and that kind of such a tragic few days. One of the things I was supposed to say at the start was that we're actually going to do one of these catching up lives with a week on Thursday. And we're going to get some people from the church. So Yvonne Mambo is going to join us. Ben and AJ is going to join us. Simon and myself are going to be kind of chatting. So if there are particular questions, we decided that between Andy and I, we wouldn't talk about it this evening in any detail. But if you wanted to join us on that night, you're so welcome to. It'd be great to get together and talk about some of the implications for us as a local church at that time. But mate, obviously we're in a really unusual season, right? Lockdown is on, although it's being eased gradually. And things are starting to reopen a little bit. But obviously, we've had best part of 3 months now where, for many people, they've barely left home. I just wanted to find out from you a little bit of a lockdown high and a lockdown low, if you're happy to share.
Yeah, certainly. Well, the lockdown low is that the washing up is always needing to be done. Like,
Yeah.
I don't remember a time where I haven't been washing up during lockdown. Like,
Right.
it's so,
Now, is that because you're
weird.
consuming more? You're just too close to the fridge to keep
Well,
going
it's
for it.
because I normally eat out. I'm saving loads of money by not eating out.
Nice.
Because I live on my own. Most of my meals are out. But I've been making lots of. I've got loads of cookery books now. I've been making loads of recipes. Not soup, by the way. Nobody likes soup. Soup is disgusting.
Philippa laughs at me because I eat so much bread when I have soup. It's basically just like I'm putting ketchup with the toast. Yeah.
It's offensive, isn't it? Soup? Yeah.
Hold on, I need to put some real quick. Jules Burr is very much on the same page as you when it comes to soup. Yeah, okay. True.
Yeah. That's right. And she helps people in the community, and so she can.
She understands.
Her. Yeah, she understands. It's a thick drink with vegetables floating in it. It's gross. Like, it's not even a drink. When have you ever picked up another drink and thought that it needed more salt? It's ridiculous.
It's actually true. Yeah.
If there's one thing that causes me to question my salvation, it's soup. Well, honestly, that's how bad it is. But
all right. So the low is that you've got too much washing up.
Well, yeah, the washing up is never done. The lockdown highs. I mean, there would be many. Another lockdown low is that all my shoes think I've been murdered. Like, because they haven't seen me.
Yeah.
They haven't seen me in ages. And the hinges on the fridge have gone because it's been opened so many times. I've been bench pressing the fridge door, basically. A lockdown high would be, I think, being able to go for lots of long walks in the Peak District, because I'm right near the Peak District, or Sherwood Forest, which is only sort of 40 minutes away from me, on my own, with my backpack and my Bible, listening to podcasts and listening to the birds.
Yeah.
And I don't mean this sort of ephemeral or engaging with nature, engaging with the Lord of creation who created nature.
Yeah.
But yeah, these long walks in the early summer afternoons and evenings with the sunlight, having been trapped inside, to then be outside and to feel the experience of the air and the sunlight, and see the green leaves and just listen to the birds. It's just so beautiful.
Yes.
I've been listening to you guys as well. Because my friend Annie said to me, I was listening to a King's Arms talk and you were mentioned in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so me being me, I basically went through all the King's Arms talks back to 2018, waiting
just to find out what we said.
Yeah, it was you. It was one of your talks. So it was just talking about what we talked about at the start, really, when I first came to King's Arms. But so that would be the lockdown high, being able to do loads of long walks.
I mean, it's a strange thing, isn't it? Because obviously, I recognise that when we talk like this, and for the people who are hearing, there's such a spectrum of people. Some people who, frankly, nothing's changed and they're still working as hard as ever, maybe even harder. Some people experiencing incredibly tough situations when they've been either close to being affected by the pandemic and everything that's going on. And, there are some people who are frankly bored or like you, though, just enabled to reconnect with some of the simple things and actually starting to appreciate the kind of the walks and the trees and the fresh air and the time to almost be forced to slow down a little bit. Do you know what I mean? And as you say, just being right on the edge of the Peak District and such stunning, countryside around where you are is just brilliant. Yeah,
but I also wouldn't want to. I think we've got to be just a little bit careful as well when people talk about finding new rhythms and things like that. As Christians, we've got to be a little bit careful about the terminology, because a lot of it can just topple over into quite Eastern
interesting
mysticism.
Yes,
and again, what most people don't realize, these people who are engaging in a sort of vague spirituality is so dangerous because it gives one the impression of being connected to God without being accountable to God. It's really dangerous, or it can be really dangerous. I'm not trying to go in too hard, but it's important to understand what these Eastern worldviews are actually teaching. The end goal of you see, people meditate and engage in yoga and things like that because they're trying to find peace and they're trying to find fulfillment. They're trying to find themselves. And so I understand that. But the core root of these Eastern worldviews is not to find yourself, but to make yourself extinct. It's not to find peace in your identity, but actually to understand that you don't have an identity. So we've just got to be a bit careful. The end goal of Buddhism and Hinduism is not self-fulfillment, it's self-extinction. If you want to deal in mindfulness, read the New Testament. Romans 12 says, Paul says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind.
Yeah.
John chapter 8, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
Romans 6, think of yourselves as dead to sin. James 1, consider it pure joy. If you want to change your thoughts and find peace and fulfillment and find your true identity, read the New Testament.
It's going to change everything. But you can do it when you're outside going for a walk. That is a good thing.
Oh, yeah. So the point is, you can be outside. Engage with the God of creation, not just this vague idea of spirituality.
Yeah, no, very good. Well, mate, listen, we're coming up to an hour, and I wanted to make sure that I gave you the opportunity of sharing a little bit about kind of how you're still seeing God move, even despite the lockdown. And I know, because the fact that I saw you share something on social media, that you're seeing people lives get changed. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of share something, encourage us with what God's doing around you.
Yeah, so I think at Redeemer King, I think the pattern that we're seeing is it's the parable of the sower. So we don't see loads of people become Christians at the moment, but the people who do become Christians have massive impacts. You know, so there's a lady called Red who became a Christian sort of in lockdown, basically. And, you know, she'd been journeying with us for a little bit, but she became a Christian in lockdown. And then Christianity Magazine took it up, videoed her, filmed her testimony, and it's been seen by 35,000 people.
Amazing, yeah.
So that's amazing. And then we've got another guy called Dale, who's doing our Alpha course at the moment, and he texted me yesterday to say, just to let you know, mate, Alpha has totally changed my life.
Amazing.
You know, we haven't got loads of people on Alpha, but they're all just really getting it. There's a lady called Becky doing Alpha, and again, she's given her life to Jesus, and she's learning what it means to be a daughter of the King. And she I'll tell you this, not to big myself up, but just because I'd always wanted to be part of this dream. So she came to see a comedy night that I did, and she enjoyed the comedy night, and she was an atheist. And then she had this dream, and Jesus appeared to her in this dream. I was up on this stage, and Jesus appeared next to her in this dream and said, listen to him, you can trust him.
Wow,
Jesus
come on
never
now.
appeared to me in a dream. Like, it's not fair.
That's amazing.
So we're just, again, we're not seeing loads of fruit in terms of quantity, but quality wise, we're seeing huge fruit, and the impact that it's having. Yeah, you know, it's the.
But based on what we said earlier, though, I think that's just so important, because you know it's not just about hands raised in a moment. Also, we want to make disciples. We want to see people who are transformed, following Jesus, because that's the hope that we found. That's the transformation that we found, and that's what we're so keen to other people to know as well, isn't it? It's that peace, it's that purpose, it's that, you know, gets me all excited. And mate, tell us a little about the writing. I guess in this season, are you writing a lot? Is this a particularly conducive time to get your creative energies flowing?
Well, I'm doing a lot of writing, but it's mainly preaching, because I'm preaching at least once a fortnight, and I work really hard on them. So I am doing a lot of reading, and I'm doing a lot of writing. I'm not doing loads of comedy writing or novel writing. I'd like to, but I think I just don't quite get around to it. And lockdown is hard for most people, particularly for creatives or self-employed people. Lockdown is hard because where you work, where you live, and where you play. So where you work, where you rest, and where you play are now in the same place.
That's right. Yeah.
It's all the same place. Mm-hmm. And so it's very difficult to segregate different parts of your mind. And I find it difficult, which is why I go for these long walks, because I feel like, oh, I'm actually free. I've got some release there, and I've got some headspace. But I've got a lot of previous to lockdown, I felt like my mind was quite fallow, and now I feel like my mind is quite fertile. But I don't think I've necessarily sprouted. I don't think there's lots of stuff growing yet, but it's germinating under the surface. And yeah, I just I'm trying to be patient, because a day in lockdown is it goes on forever, and it also flies. And I don't know how that works.
Yes.
We've just got to allow for the fact that the best way to do a lot is to keep doing a little. The best way to do nothing is to resolve to do everything.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
We'll take that away with us.
Yeah. It's not
slow and steady makes a massive difference, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, listen, Andy, we love you. We're for you. So appreciate all that you've been to us over these years, and so many special memories about your times with us. And one day it'll be great to have you come back and you know, be with us again, because it's always not just entertaining, but it's a real inspiring time as well. So on behalf of all at King's Arms, mate, may God bless you and all that you're doing. May you be super fruitful both across the country and particularly in Chesterfield, where you and Karl are really going for it as well, mate. So really appreciate you being with us tonight, okay?
Thanks,
and guys, if you've been tuning in, it's been great to have you. Thanks so much for kind of chipping in with us, and I trust that you'll kind of join us again. As I said earlier on, I kind of next catching up with, we're going to do with some King's Arms friends as we talk about racism and equality. And so that's going to be a week on Thursday, 8 o'clock, and then we're going to get into a rhythm because we've got a number of these lined up. So really hope you guys are enjoying them. And whether it's Claire, Helen, Vi, Gus, guys, great to have you guys with us, and hopefully see you again. Bye for now.